When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Biod, and I'm very, very happy to have you with us. And please allow me to be the first to wish you a very happy Independence Day. Tomorrow, the United States celebrates its 248th birthday, and tonight we plan to celebrate this amazing country of ours on our program. And to do so, we're going to have a special sit-down conversation with one of the American patriots that helped us declare our independence, the legendary Dr. Benjamin Franklin. But before we get to all that, first I want to just give a shout out to our friends at the Article 5 Outfitters, the COS store. We've got a very special discount that is going on right now, and you don't want to miss it. At 11:59 Pacific time, the sale will end, but we are having a warehouse clearance sale with products discounted up to 75%. We've also got some really, really cool gear that is now in and available. You may want to check out this America 2024 t-shirt that is available now for Independence Day, and so much more. So please go to shop conventionofstates.com and check out the sale that's going on right now. Again, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time is the end of this sale. You don't want to miss it. Shop for your favorite patriot over at the Article 5 Outfitters store. Now, for anyone that is new to the show and maybe new to Convention of States as an organization, I'd like to welcome you to our organization. We are a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution in order to call a convention for proposing amendments to the Constitution that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution, and to date, we have 19 states that have done so. So welcome. Thank you for being with us. And now it's time for 5 for 5. All right, and now tonight, since this is a special Independence Day COS at Home, for our 5 for 5, we're going to take a trip inside Independence Hall to learn the story of how the second method of Article 5 was added to the Constitution. And of course, our tour guides for this story are none other than Mark Meckler and Rick Green.
Imagine you were in this room. We're in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the very place where the Constitution was done and the Declaration of Independence. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach, here with Mark Meckler. And Mark, if you had been in this room when it happened, when the Constitution was created, and George Mason stands up at the very end to say, hey guys, wait a minute, we messed up, we got a real problem here, what would you do?
I'd have probably been irritated. Sit down,
you can hear the
George.
grumbling, right?
Yeah,
They're like, let's go home.
Man. It's 2 days. September 15th, 1787, 2 days before the end of convention. You guys have heard the story. It's hot in here.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have HVAC back then, so it's hot. The windows are boarded up. They're all irritated by now. They want to go home. Mason stands to address the men, and he says, we have a terrible problem with the document we've drafted.
I can hear the groans now.
Yeah, everybody's like, oh,
Here
George again, right?
Yeah.
And he says, we've given the power to the federal government to propose amendments should they deem them necessary, but we've not given the same power to the people acting through the states.
Now I got to stop you there. Back up. They've been here for all those weeks to create a federal government. They've redesigned the whole thing. The Constitution is designed. Here's our 3 branches of government. Here's what states can do. Here's what federal government can do. They created all of that. and he's saying, wait a minute, we have a problem.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of lost history in there. Actually, the very first draft that went out to the working committees contained this power. The states had the power.
I didn't know that.
The federal government didn't, actually. And when it came back, somehow it had been reversed. And so he notices this at the last minute, literally brings this problem up. Everybody groans. We think we don't have the videotape, right? Yeah. But then he asks a question that I think is the real question, and this question resonates across the ages. He says, are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny will ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny?
Now wait, let me put that in country boy language. I'm a country boy. That means if the federal government ever gets out of control, do we really think the very people that stole power, that took it without permission, will just give it back? We'll just hand it off to us?
You know, whenever I tell this story in a hall or in a meeting somewhere, people laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what they did. You know, we don't have a recording. We can kind of tell. Madison's notes, in that point, they say nin com. It's Latin for no comment, essentially. That's an abbreviation. No debate. These guys debated everything.
That's the 1787 version of mic drop.
Exactly.
Right?
I call it the forehead slap. Like everybody just went, oh my gosh.
How did we miss that?
I can't believe we missed that. Yeah. And so Eldridge Gary proposes the second part of Article 5, gives the states 2/3 of them power to call and convene a convention of states for proposing amendments. Then the vote's taken. I think this part's incredible. Imagine them in this room, right? Ready to go home. It's unanimous.
Unanimous.
Absolutely. So it was so obvious to them that we had to give this power to the people acting through the states, that there's no debate, and it's unanimously adopted.
Now let's just summarize that real quick. So they created the Constitution, they created the three branches of government, they created all these different levels of accountability, and they said, we didn't solve everything. In the future there will be issues, this will need to be amended. Congress can propose amendments and send it back to the states, and they ratify it. And what George Mason changed, what they actually put in there at the end is, the states can propose amendments. The states come together and propose amendments, and then it goes back to all the states to be ratified. And unanimously, they said, that's a good idea. We need that second mechanism.
Yeah, important to remember what that means is they gave the ultimate power not to the federal government, not to Washington, D.C., but to the people in the states.
Thank you, George Mason.
Thank you, George Mason, indeed. And what an incredible story that is. And we may not have the footage, but later on in the program, we will have one of the men that was in the room when that was taking place, and we'll hear from him about exactly what things were like at that moment. But for now, we want to hear the latest update on everything that's going on with Convention of States, legislatively, grassroots-wise. So I'm going to turn it over to Producer G with COS Now.
In a surprise move on June 13th, the Delaware Senate decided to debate and vote on Convention of States Action's Article 5 resolution. Here's Delaware State Director Jenny Watkins.
This process is actually one of the many checks and balances built into our U.S. Constitution, where you, the state legislature, have both the power and the responsibility to do what the federal government is refusing to do, and that is act in the interest of the people.
Although the application secured more yes votes than no votes, it ultimately failed due to 7 members refusing to vote. Nevertheless, this milestone marks an important step forward for the Delaware team. According to groundbreaking new polling results, an astounding 76% of likely Ohio voters overwhelmingly support the grassroots-led effort to call an Article 5 convention. The scientific survey was conducted by Susquehanna Research, chronicling supermajority support for Convention of States from every major ethnicity and age bracket. On June 4th, the Ohio House Government Oversight Committee held a hearing on HJR 3, the COS Action Resolution, which has been passed in 19 other states thus far. It was an opponents-only hearing, but you can get the COS Live crew's response by visiting conventionofstates.com/COS Live. In other news, Rolling Stone published a hit piece on Tim Dunn, who is one of the board members for Convention of States, in which they print several bald-faced lies, stating that COS Action, quote, ominously seeks to rewrite the U.S. Constitution.
What you talking about, Will?
They go on to write, quote, in speeches to this group, Dunn has overtly mixed religion and politics, including with the declaration that God's on our side.
Gasp.
While the focus of the national media and political junkies is understandably trained upon the 2024 presidential and congressional elections, Convention of States Action volunteers know that the action is just as vibrant and significant in the state houses, and those activists have accomplished a great deal in this vital election year. In 2024, COS teams have thus far organized or scheduled surge days in 33 states, As a result, over 370 state legislators across the country have co-sponsored the COS Action Resolution, calling for an Article 5 convention to propose fiscal restraints on the federal government, term limits on Congress and federal officials, and limits on the scope and power of the federal government. In addition to the 19 states that have already adopted that resolution, with 34 being necessary, a total of 21 additional states have filed our Article 5 resolution during the current legislative session and assigned it to various committees for consideration. In committee, COS resolutions have been favorably reported in several states. The resolution was approved by the Hawaii Senate Committee on Public Safety and Intergovernmental and Military Affairs with the unanimous support of the Democrats on the panel. Meanwhile, in the Bay State, the COS resolution passed the Joint Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs, which included 13 Democratic committee members and 3 Republican members. The Pennsylvania Senate State Government Committee approved the COS resolution in late April. That committee is chaired by COS supporter Senator Chris Dush. In Iowa, the COS resolution passed the House Subcommittee and the House State Government Committee. The resolution was also approved by the Idaho Senate Judiciary and Rules Committee, marking our first time passing a committee in Idaho. North Carolina is on the verge of becoming the 20th state to join the Convention of States movement. The North Carolina House passed the COS resolution last year, and the Senate now has the opportunity to do likewise before the current legislative session ends. When the North Carolina Senate gives the nod, only 14 more state legislatures are needed to call the convention. And we'll be ready, because COS activists have also been working to pass 34 Ready legislation, which is model legislation that frames the processes for selecting commissioners who will represent their states at an Article 5 convention. So far this year, 34 Ready legislation has passed the Missouri Senate Committee on Rules, Joint Rules, Resolutions, and Ethics, as well as the Kansas House Committee on Federal and State Affairs. 34 Ready legislation was also introduced in the Mississippi and Kentucky legislatures, but what if your state has already passed the COS resolution? The grassroots army does not lie dormant, working to maintain relationships with state legislators, and championing bills regarding issues such as election integrity, parental rights, and state sovereignty issues that correspond with principles of federalism, freedom, and fundamental rights. We refer to this as F3 legislation. In Georgia, the local COS team partnered with Heritage Action to champion 3 election integrity bills, 2 of which were successfully adopted by the legislature. The COS Louisiana team has made its presence well known in Baton Rouge, and their work has yielded significant progress. HB 763, another piece of election integrity legislation, passed the Louisiana House and is currently pending in the Senate. Meanwhile, HB 114, which establishes a clear process for updating the state's voter rolls, passed the legislature and awaits the governor's signature. Legislation that bans international government organizations such as the UN, the WHO, and the World Economic Forum from asserting any jurisdiction in Louisiana was signed into law by Governor Landry on May 28th. In Tennessee, COS grassroots worked with Alliance Defending Freedom to move parental rights and education legislation through the legislature and to the desk of Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. The COS Kansas team toiled diligently to shepherd land rights legislation in the form of SB 370 through the Senate Committee on Federal and State Affairs. Legislation banning transgender surgery from being performed upon minors passed the South Carolina legislature and was signed into law by Governor Henry McMaster. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed HB 3156, which prohibits ranked choice voting. The Sooner State grassroots worked to get this bill through the legislature, again working with Heritage Action. Finally, check out these snapshots from COS events going on around the country, including Georgia, Ohio, Wyoming, Virginia, North Carolina, and Delaware. And now, you're up to date with Convention of States.
What do we want? When do we want it?
That was an incredible update, Producer G. Thank you so much for that. I mean, major kudos to all of our grassroots out there for all of the incredible things that they have been doing. The Delaware team, a big shout out to them. We weren't even necessarily expecting to see a vote there in the Senate, and yet the Delaware team has been working really hard. I remember, I was a state director back in New Jersey, and I remember there were many times where we were struggling to build a team there in Delaware, and now they have been built up, and then to have that culminate with that Senate discussion and Senate floor vote, even though we were unsuccessful, that was a major, major victory for the Delaware team. So tip of the cap to them. Ohio, some incredible polling numbers there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of that as we get later on into the program. But really great job to our Ohio team and all of the work that they're doing. And of course, the past states which are near and dear to my heart as a regional director overseeing 3 of those states that were highlighted there, Georgia, Louisiana, and Tennessee. And of course, all of the work that's being done in South Carolina, Kansas, Oklahoma, and so much more. I could not be prouder and more excited for everything that we've been doing with Convention of States and our grassroots army out there. So just wonderful, wonderful things to be sure. And now we have the great pleasure of welcoming an American icon to the program and one of our founding fathers, and that is the esteemed Benjamin Franklin. So, Dr. Franklin, welcome to the program. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Hi, sir. Very well. Thank you for asking. It's a pleasure to be with you. And from the sounds of things, there's quite a lot of change that has happened since I've been here.
There certainly has been. Well, sir, it is an absolute honor to have you. And the first question that I have for you is, I think it's appropriate since tomorrow we are going to be celebrating America's birthday and all of the hard work that you and many of our founding fathers put together with getting the Declaration of Independence, our independence declared from Great Britain, and that putting together that amazing document. Although the Declaration of Independence states it quite well, I'm wondering, sir, would you be able to describe for us the conditions of the country at that time and the actions that ultimately led you and your fellow patriots to risk everything, including your very lives, to declare independence from Great Britain?
It's with a solemn heart and a resolute spirit that I recount the grievous conditions and pernicious actions that compelled us to declare our independence from Great Britain. As you probably are aware, many years we were subjected to a series of oppressive measures imposed by the British Crown and Parliament. And it began with the imposition of unjust taxes, most notably the Stamp Act of 1765 and Townshend Acts of 1767, levies that were laid upon us without our consent, for we had no representation in that body. Further indignities followed, such as the quartering of British soldiers in our homes and the establishments of things called writs of assistance, which permitted the invasive search and seizure of our properties without the proper warrants. And these affronts to our natural rights were compounded in 1770 when the British troops fired upon and massacred unarmed men in our great city of Boston. And then coming on the heels of that in 1774, the intolerable coercive acts, which sought to punish the good city and the good people of Massachusetts by closing their port of Boston and ordering their charter unilaterally. Our earnest petitions for redress were grievously ignored and were met with disdain and further entrenchments of tyranny, despite my earnest diplomatic entreaties while I was in London. And our assemblies were dissolved, our charters revoked, and our rights as Englishmen were utterly disregarded. We were left with no peaceful recourse, for despotism had surely entrenched itself up on our shores. Thus, in 1774, as I was dressed down before the London's Privy Council by Solicitor General Wetterman over the Hutchison affair, it became evident to me that I was no longer an Englishman, but an American. And with that, we could no longer remain in bondage to a government that would trample on our liberties with no course of redress. And that fateful conflict presented itself just before I returned back to my home in Philadelphia from London on the Green in Lexington in April of 1775, where a few brave men stood to face the British regulars in resistance to this imposition of tyranny. A year later, that Continental Congress, after King George declared us rebels, with the words drafted by the Committee of Five, led by Thomas Jefferson and reflected the collective will of the people, we resolved that we had to take up arms in defense of our rights. And on July 4th, 1776, we solemnly declared that these truths were self-evident and that these united colonies are and are of a right ought to be free and independent states. A few days later, that declaration was read from a printed Dunlap broadside by our great General Washington to our faithful militias as they were gathered to resolve our purpose and our cause. We pledged our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to one another for the cause of liberty and the establishment of a novel government, deriving its powers from the consent of the governed. It was a grave commitment, fraught with peril, but one we undertook with unbridled hope and expectation that the future generations might enjoy the blessings of liberty for which we endeavored so fiercely.
Incredible, incredible. And I think it would be an understatement to say that those actions taken by those incredible patriots sent shockwaves around the world and even within your own country. And so, sir, I would ask you, did it surprise you to see that so many of your fellow countrymen did not rise up to fight for your liberty, or even that many others actually rose up and took arms against what you were trying to accomplish, including your own son?
Sir, indeed, it is a matter of considerable sorrow and perplexity that many of our countrymen did not join our cause for liberty, and that some, and as you said, my own son, took up arms against us. That division was a reflection of the varied interests and loyalties and circumstances that pervaded our colonies. It required a long period for some to arrive at the realization that their rights as Englishmen had evaporated, as Americans like I had come to understand. Some, bound by ties of commerce or affection to the crown, remained loyal, convinced that that reconciliation and redress could be achieved through continued allegiance. Others feared the uncertainties and the dangers that rebellion might bring, preferring the familiar yoke of British rule over the risk of inherent in the pursuit of our independence. My son William, as you said, the royal governor of New Jersey, stood among those loyalists. His adherence to the crown was rooted in his belief in order and the rule of law, but he was predominantly motivated by his own personal and political interests that aligned with British authority. It's painful, and I don't speak of it often. It still is a division and a rift in the fabric of my very family, as he chose his own interest, yet it exemplifies the broader conflict that beset our land and crossed many families. The contest for liberty was not solely a military struggle. It was a battle of principles and hearts. We recognized that the path to independence was fraught with discord, and that unity in such a diverse land would not easily be achieved. Nevertheless, we remained resolute, for we were convinced that the cause of liberty was just, and that in time its righteousness would prevail, drawing more and more of our countrymen under its banner. It was my hope that as our struggle progressed and the injustices of British rule became ever clearer, more would come to see the necessity of our cause and join us in the fight for a free and a self-governing nation. Until then, we persevered with faith in the ultimate triumph of liberty and justice.
And prevail you certainly did, sir, and thank you for all that you have sacrificed throughout that conflict. Now, Dr. Franklin, after we were ultimately successful in declaring our independence and then winning the war for independence, we then entered into a new system of government under a binding document known as the Articles of Confederation. And sir, I would like to ask you, in your opinion, why do you believe that the Articles of Confederation ultimately failed?
Well, sir, I must confess that my thoughts on the Articles are tempered mainly by a reflective view, as I was in France while their deployment was being effected. However, in reflecting upon the Articles, one must acknowledge that they were crafted amidst the exigencies of war and the initial fervor for unity against a common enemy. However, the deficiencies of that framework became manifest as we endeavored to govern these burgeoning states during peacetime. Foremost among the flaws of the Articles was the lack of a strong central authority. The Congress, as it was established, possessed no means whatsoever to enforce its resolutions or even to levy taxes directly, relying instead upon the voluntary compliance of the states. And this rendered the central government impotent in matters of finance, and we were unable to pay our debts or fund our operations, and we were dependent upon the goodwill of state legislators. Furthermore, the Articles afforded each state equal representation regardless of their size or population, and that led to an imbalance in the influence and fostering parochial interests over the common good. And decisions of great import required the assent of a supermajority, making swift and decisive action nigh impossible. The absence of an executive branch in those articles to enforce laws and a judiciary to interpret them led to a lack of cohesion and the inability to resolve disputes between the states. And this engendered a fragile union where interstate conflicts and economic discord threatened the stability of the whole. The Articles were a necessary first step, don't get me wrong, a symbol of our collective will to be free and independent, yet their weaknesses demonstrated that a more robust and cohesive framework was required to ensure the prosperity and security of our nascent nation.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Now, obviously, the next step in the road to America ultimately becoming what we are now as a nation in terms of our constitutional republic was that 1787 convention that took place in Philadelphia, home to you, of course. If you would, sir, please share with us what that experience was like to be there during the drafting of our Constitution. And if you would as well, please share with us perhaps what your favorite part of that Constitution may be.
Aye, Jonathan, the Constitutional Convention of 1787, convened, as you said, in the very hallowed halls of Philadelphia, where I had spent many days and many hours, even from a young man. And what an august and consequential assembly it was. The experience from my part was one of intense deliberation and earnest endeavor as 55 delegates from diverse states came together with the noble aim of crafting a more perfect union. We gathered in that Pennsylvania State House with the weight of our fledgling nation's future on our shoulders. And it took us the better part of 10 days just to have an adequate delegation attending to begin conducting the business at hand. The inadequacies of the Articles of Confederation that we just spoke about had become undeniable, and it was clear that a new framework was imperative to ensure the survival and prosperity of our nation. As delegates, we had been commissioned by our states and by the Confederation Congress to make the necessary changes and provisions as shall render the same adequate to the exigencies of the Union. The proceedings were conducted in dire secrecy, with the doors standing guard, the windows barred shut, and all of us as delegates were allowed to debate freely and candidly. The secrecy fostered that environment where ideas could be exchanged without fear of immediate public scrutiny or backlash. And our discussions were vigorous at times, often contentious. And as we grappled with the fundamental questions of government and representation and federal authority, many of the contrary opinions were less formally resolved under the mulberry tree in my very backyard through hospitality and a touch of my favorite Madeira, with less pressing but equally inquisitive debate, which was carried forward into the following day's assembly with the hall's formal affairs. One of the most formidable challenges was reconciling the interests of large and small states. Mr. Roger Sherman's proposition was used to resolve this much debated impasse by establishing our bicameral legislature with a proportional representation in the House of Representatives and an equal representation in the Senate. This balanced approach helped assuage the fears of domination by larger states within a newly stronger federal system. Another critical issue was the question of slavery. Although deeply contentious and morally fraught, a temporary compromise was reached to ensure the participation of Southern states. And while a good many from the Declaration onward would have put an end to this peculiar institution, pragmatic necessity in righting our struggling nation caused us to push this fervent issue, unfortunately, to our posterity for their resolution. Throughout this convention, I endeavored to mediate and advocate for pragmatic solutions, often urging my fellow delegates to compromise for the greater good. My age and experience gave me a certain gravitas, and I frequently appealed to reason and conciliation. The Honorable Mr. Pierce commented on me in his notes on this occasion that all the operations of nature he seems to understand. The very heavens obey him, and the clouds yield up their lightning to be imprisoned in his rod. But what claim he has to the politician, posterity must determine. He is no speaker, nor does he seem to let politics engage his attention. He is, however, a most extraordinary man and tells a story in a style more engaging than anything I have ever heard. He's 82 years old and possesses an activity of mind equal to a youth of 25. The result of our labors, the Constitution, was not without its imperfections. Yet it represented a bold and an innovative framework, establishing a federal system with checks and balances to prevent tyranny. It provided a strong central government while preserving the sovereignty of the states and the rights of individuals. As I stood there that day and affixed my signature to that document, I was mindful of the profound responsibility that we bore. The Constitution was, as I remarked, not perfect, but it was necessary. It was an embodiment of our collective wisdom and a foundation upon the future generations could build and improve. I also caught sight of the artist's son in the back of General Washington's chair and recalled the profound sense of optimism as I commented that despite the difficulty in determining if an artist's sun was rising or setting, that day I was certain that the sun was rising, and it began to illuminate the great republic that we hoped to achieve. The convention was a momentous chapter in the annals of our republic, a testament to the capacity of human reason, the pursuit of a just and stable government, and a demonstration, Jonathan, of selfless service by all those that attended.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Now, earlier in the program, we were giving the story and shared with everyone the story of Article 5, particularly the second portion of Article 5, which allows the states to propose amendments to the Constitution. And so, Doctor, I was wondering if you could, for us, take us back into the room at that moment on September 15th of 1787, when Colonel George Mason recommended that second method for proposing amendments. Tell us, what was it like in the room at that moment?
It was cooler than it had been in August, for certain, but the day was September the 15th when Colonel Mason rose and recommended that second method for proposing amendments to the Constitution. And when he rose, it was quite tense because we had just received the document back from the Committee of Style, and the mood was still quite cautious and contemplative and very much earnest consideration. And we knew that our time was short and we needed to finish the task at hand as soon as possible. But Colonel Mason, a man of great wisdom and foresight, suggested that amendments only being proposed by Congress was exceptional and dangerous, and that no amendments of the proper kind would ever be attained by the people if the government should become oppressive, as he verily believed that it would. But bear in mind, this was not the first or the only consideration of this topic during the convention. As early as Tuesday, June 5th, as the propositions for consideration were laid out before the convention, the 13th proposition regarded that provision ought to be made for hereafter amending the system now to be established without requiring the assent of the national legislature. And with my friend Mr. Gary from Massachusetts favoring it as the novelty and difficulty of the experiment requires periodic revision, and the prospect of such a revision would give immediate stability to our new government. But again, on Monday, August 6th, in the incredible heat of summer, the proposition was once again presented, but this time stated that on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states in the Union for an amendment of this Constitution, the legislature of the United States shall call a convention for that purpose. So if you notice, the oft expressed sentiment was for the states and thereby the people to lead as at the exclusion of the legislature in forming these amendments. But as he spoke, the delegates listened intently and acutely aware of the implications of such a provision. There was a palpable sense of responsibility, for we were constructing a framework that would govern not only our generation, but countless generations to come. And the notion of empowering the states to call a convention was seen as a vital safeguard, ensuring that the Constitution could adapt and evolve in response to the will of the people and the changing needs of our nation. And this recommendation stemmed from our profound distrust of consolidating power and a deep-seated belief in the necessity of mechanisms to correct and refine our government document. Some among us were apprehensive, others were willing to move forward, yet there was a prevailing recognition that without a means to amend the Constitution outside the confines of congressional halls, the people's ability to address grievances would turn out no differently than ours with Great Britain. And with this, Mr. Gouverneur Morris and Mr. Gary moved to amend the article so as to require a convention on the application of 2/3 of those states. After a brief comment by Mr. Madison, the amendment to the article was agreed to unanimously.
Just incredible. And I didn't even realize that it had been discussed so early on in the convention and then came back when Colonel Mason brought it up. I mean, that is just an incredible story, sir, and thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry to say that we were running short on time here, but we do have a few more questions, and then at least one question here from those of us watching and listening from the comfort of their own homes. So, Doctor, after we were able to get that incredible document after that convention, there were some of your fellow founding fathers, including Patrick Henry, that alleged that the 1787 convention had exceeded its authority. How do you answer such a charge, sir? I believe you even mentioned the words that were in the commissions when you led into your discussion about the 1787 convention. If you would, please share that with our audience again.
Absolutely. I must respond with both candor and conviction, because it is true that the convention was initially convened with the mandate to amend the Articles of Confederation. However, we were delivered into this task, and it became abundantly clear that mere amendments would not suffice to remedy the manifold deficiencies of that framework. And our commissions clearly defined that we had the authority to come up with any solutions that were fit to preserve the union that we had amongst these states. And those articles had proven themselves inadequate, and they lacked the requisite strength to enforce the laws and to provide the interest for the collective states. And so the importance of the central government under the Articles left us vulnerable to internal discord and to external threats. And faced with those realities, we as delegates, including myself, recognized that a more radical and comprehensive approach was necessary. And it was not a decision that we took lightly, nor without a profound sense of gravity of our actions. We understood that our primary duty was to preserve the prosperity of the Union as directed by Congress and by our states. And thus we undertook the creation of a new Constitution. Patrick Henry and others who objected to our actions did so from a place of genuine concern for liberty and states' rights. Their vigilance against potential tyranny was and remains to this day vital to the health of our republic. Yet I would argue that our actions at the convention were guided by the same spirit of patriotism and dedication to the principles of self-governance. The new Constitution was not imposed upon the people. It was presented to them for ratification, and it underwent rigorous debate for almost a year and scrutiny in every state, allowing the citizens of their representatives to deliberate upon its merits, both Federalist and Anti-Federalist. The broad support it ultimately received demonstrated a consensus that the new framework was both necessary and beneficial. And in addressing these allegations, I assert that our authority derived not only from our initial mandate, but from our broader obligation to secure the future of our nation. The Constitution that we crafted was designed to remedy the deficiencies of the Articles, to provide a robust yet flexible system of governance, and to protect the liberties for which we had so arduously fought. And in this spirit, I hope that even those who opposed our actions can appreciate the earnest intentions and the enduring benefits that have arisen from that work. The success of our republic depends on continual vigilance, dialogue, and the willingness to adapt in the pursuit of a more perfect union.
So very well said, sir. Thank you so much. And now, last question for me, and then as I mentioned, we have a question from our audience as well. Doctor, I think so many of us look back on you and so many of the other founding fathers and patriots of that era, and we say how incredibly intelligent and wise these men were. And so I'm wondering, sir, do you have any parting wisdom or perhaps even warnings for posterity regarding our republic?
Indeed, indeed. And I would say that the men that gathered in that room were no more intelligent than you are, sir. And as we stand on the threshold of a new era, I feel compelled to impart some wisdom and warnings as well regarding that republic. The success and longevity of our nation depends not merely on the structures we have established, but more importantly on the virtues and the vigilance of its citizens. First and foremost, guard against the encroachments of tyranny in any form. Power, once concentrated, tends to perpetuate itself and can corrupt even the most well-meaning individuals. The system of checks and balances we have devised is intended to prevent that concentration of power. And as I have said before, it is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. Secondly, I want you to cherish and preserve the principles of liberty and equality. Our republic is founded upon the belief that all men are created equal, endowed with inalienable rights, and any deviation from those principles threatens the very foundation of our nation. Strive always to extend those rights and to ensure that justice is applied to all. Moreover, that foster a spirit of unity and cooperation among the states. While our federal system allows for diversity in policies and practice, the strength of our union lies in the ability of us to act collectively for the common good. We should never let regional interest or petty factions erode the bonds that unite us. Education is most popular pillar of our republic. An informed and enlightened citizenry is the bulwark of our free society. Encourage learning and the pursuit of knowledge in all forms. for only through wisdom can we navigate the challenges that no doubt lie ahead. And finally, practice frugality and simplicity. Extravagance and corruption can undermine the moral fabric of our society. Let public servants be examples of virtue and integrity, mindful that they serve at the pleasure of the people and for the greater good of this great nation.
Just incredible wisdom, Doctor, and thank you so very much. And as I mentioned, we do have a question from our audience, and I think what it would require of me, sir, before I ask the question is just to give you very briefly a synopsis of what things look like now here, nearly 248 years since since our nation was founded. We are looking at a system of governance where the members of Congress and the members and our senators, and they look at the role of politics as a career. It's not something where it's merely a public service anymore. It is more of a career and a way for them to not only gain notoriety and fame, but fortune as well. We unfortunately have a Congress that will spend trillions of dollars a year and put us into an incredible deficit with unfathomable debt. We have a president right now that is showing clear signs of dementia. We also have a fourth branch of government, not instituted into the Constitution, but essentially delegated powers from Congress to allow a system where we have departments of energy, departments of education, environmental protection agency, homeland security, Federal Bureau of Investigation, so many different arms of the federal government, and they are the ones that make the dictates and the rules and make their own decisions as to how we are to be governed and not allow us to govern ourselves, nor do we have any recourse to vote on some of these officials that then go and make these decisions. We also have somewhat ruined the documents in a sense with a amendment that would now require that the states no longer have representation in the government, in that the senators are now directly elected by the people, taking it away from the state legislature. I'm sure, Doctor, that I could go on about a number of other issues that we have going on, including, I would add one other thing. And when I said that some of these politicians look at it as a career, many of them are in their 80s and 90s before they even leave Congress and go on and enjoy their sunset years at home. They continue on and continue on. So, Doctor, the question that we had was, knowing all of that, and again, I'm sure I didn't do it near the justice, is there anything that you may have done differently in drafting the Constitution, knowing where we are 248 years later?
Oh, dear sir, what a sad predicament, and I don't know whether to weep or answer your question. I would probably say that if there were one thing that I look back and in the deliberations as we were talking about how we were going to provide or pay those people that would serve, whether it was the president or whether it was the legislators, I was an advocate for no pay, only covering the expenses that they should incur in doing their job. I would probably say, as I listen to your long list of difficulties, I would probably have controlled the purse strings a lot more closely and not allowed that debt because there was no thought in our mind that the federal government would ever run a debt that would be passed on to posterity that could not be paid for in our own generation. To us, that was a very immoral activity. And so I would say if there was something that we might have done, it would probably have been something in that vein to make the posterity a lot more dependable going into the future.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us in celebration and bring us back to that time in history. Do you have any final words, sir?
If you might, may I offer a toast?
Absolutely.
So as we celebrate our great independency this day, may I share with you just a toast. Ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed friends and fellow patriots, tonight it is with great pride and solemn reflection that I raise my glass and toast to the independency of our beloved nation. We took a bold step declaring to the world that these united colonies were and of a right ought to be free and independent states. Our journey has been arduous, marked by sacrifice, valor, and unyielding resolve. We've faced trials on the battlefield, we've endured hardships, and we've weathered the storms of war and uncertainty. Yet through it all, our spirit has remained unbroken and our determination unwavering. Tonight, as we stand at this threshold, we are reminded the principles of which we fought and the hopes that we carry for our republic. The Constitution we have crafted is a testament to our commitment to liberty, justice, and the rule of law. It embodies our collective wisdom and our faith in our Republican form of government, firmly resting on those governed. Let us never forget the sacrifices made by those who came before us, nor the responsibilities that rest upon our shoulders. The preservation of our hard-won independency demands vigilance, virtue, and unity. It requires that we remain ever watchful against the encroachments of tyranny and steadfast in our pursuit of the common good. So let us raise our glasses high and toast to the enduring spirit of freedom and the noble cause of self-governance. To the United States of America, may she ever stand as a beacon of liberty and a testament to the indomitable will of a free people. To independence, to the republic, to liberty and justice for all. Cheers.
Cheers. God bless you, sir. Thank you for everything. And thank you for joining us on COS at Home. God bless.
God bless you, sir. Thank you for.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was just an incredible conversation with Dr. Ben Franklin, brought to us by an incredible patriot known as Darren York, who is a co-state director in the great state of Texas. And if you would like to hear a little bit more directly from Darren about how he brought Dr. Franklin to life, you can go to conventionofstates.com/Ben Franklin. We have a behind the scenes interview with him. But wow, an incredible conversation and just amazing wisdom shared with us from Ben Franklin. So now let's go ahead and move on to action at home. So in my opinion, one of the best ways that we can honor the founding fathers is by preparing our young people to be the guardians of our American legacy. And Convention of States believes this as well, and that's why we're doing it using our Emerging Leaders program. Check it out.
The Emerging Leaders program is an opportunity for young people from all over the country, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of dreams and interests to come together and discover their purpose, discover who they are, discover what it means to be an American, what it means to be free, and be equipped to take their skills and their talents and everything they learn to the next step in their personal and professional life as they go out and fight for freedom. As Ronald Reagan said, freedom isn't passed in the bloodstream. It needs to be carried and fought for by each generation. And so for me, I need to teach and equip my generation and the next generation to choose the good and to know what that looks like. Because if I don't, and if I don't do my duty, the next generation might never know.
Amazing. Now, joining me now are two fabulous young people in charge of our Emerging Leaders program. They are the ELP Senior Coordinator, Kristen Stanchu, and the ELP Development Coordinator, Jackson Allen. Kristen and Jackson, how are you both doing?
Doing good. Thanks, Jonathan.
Great. Thanks for having us, Jonathan.
So so happy that you were able to join us, and I feel like the room has just gotten even more intelligent. I mean, we had Ben Franklin, now we've got these two young people. I'm not sure we'll be able to have a better COS at home in the future. Kristen, if you would, please describe the ELP and what our mission statement is for the program.
Yes, absolutely. So the Emerging Leaders Program is a 9-month internship program that's completely virtual with Convention of States. And it's very unique because it's a twofold program. Interns come in and they work with us in a practical work with one of our departments. They get a hands-on grassroots experience with what it's like to advance our mission of self-governance here at Convention of States. But we also emphasize a lot of personal development, personal mentorship with the interns as we help them grow and discover their identity and their purpose. Our mission at the Emerging Leaders Program is to inspire young men and women to be strong, virtuous citizens who will serve their generation as servant leaders, preserving liberty, defending truth, promoting justice. The thing is, we don't just want our interns to leave our organization with more knowledge or grassroots experience. I mean, they will leave with so much of that when they're finished with this program. But more than that, they're going to leave with a newfound confidence, a new sense of purpose, a new sense of identity, so they can be equipped and prepared to go into whatever field that they're called to in their professional life.
Excellent. Jackson, would you mind telling us how ELP is different from other political internships, and who exactly should apply for this type of program?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've done a lot of work to differentiate this program in many ways. And for starters, it's a completely remote internship. So everything is done online via Zoom and other online platforms. And we've designed it for college students or young professionals that are starting out to be flexible enough to work in with their schedule in whatever else they're doing. And so that just logistically separates it from the beginning, but then we've separated it in so many other ways as well. Not only, as like Kristen was saying, you get to work with members of our national staff and get to do real political work on the front lines of this organization and apply different skill sets depending on what you're interested in. But I think what sets this above everything else is the amount of development we want to put into our interns, that we want to pour more into our interns, into our emerging leaders, then they're going to pour into our organization. And we do that through a servant leadership curriculum to really press into the heart of some issues in your professional and personal life and really seek growth from that. And then we focus on professional development, on training in the Constitution, on the foundations of Western civilization, and then on statesmanship as well. How do we apply that leadership as statesmen in the culture and in the political arena as well? And so I've seen this has, changed my life. It's completely developed me over the last few years, but I've also seen it affect so many others as well. And I think we're the type of people that we're looking for this program are young people that have a desire to learn and to grow, a desire to be challenged intellectually, a desire to reflect and grow in all of those areas that we're seeking to develop, and that they want to go out and change the culture and whatever God has put on their heart.
Excellent, excellent. So lastly, if you would, both of you, having worked with young people as part of the ELP for the last few years, do you see hope for America in the next generation? And Jackson, if you wouldn't mind starting us by answering that question.
Yeah, I think so. I've had a unique experience getting to work with my generation, both in DC and in Texas, and in various other places around the country. And I think what I've seen is that we have a very active minority in our generation that understands our history, understands our Constitution, understands the law, and is working actively to make a difference. And that's huge. And that's a huge thing that we need. However, I think what's even more encouraging, I think what gives me even more hope is that our whole generation is gaining an awareness that they are being grounded in truth, that they are seeing the lies around them, that there's a spiritual awakening going on as well, and that they are seeking to understand those lies, to understand truth. And I think that's changing everything about this next generation. I think the work that is being done in DC is, important at times, but largely doesn't move the needle. The work of convention of states, I think, is even more important. But I think to make those things lasting in the long run, we need the younger generation, my generation, the generation after me, to there be a change in the culture there, to develop servant leaders, to develop statesmen that are rooted in strong values, that are guided by principles, and that are led by virtue. And so that's what we really want to do at the Emerging Leaders Program, is really invest in that, and just be a small part of that change in this generation coming up.
Yeah, I'd echo what Jackson said, and I would just add that although it can be disappointing sometimes when you look at our culture and you look at my generation specifically, there is hope, because there is a remnant of this generation that is hungry for truth, that is seeking wisdom, that does want to grow in those areas and does want to protect the principles that made this country what it is. And they are willing to stand and fight and do their duty if only they're equipped to know how. And that's why programs like this exist and so many other avenues like it, because we want to develop and equip those people. We're not looking to change everyone's mind. We're looking to seek out and equip the few who want this and who are hungry for it. And it only takes a few. And those are the few that we want in this program and that we want to send out into the culture. And that's where I see hope.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you found this conversation to be impressive by these two young people, you're looking at two graduates from the ELP program. And in fact, you can even look at Kristen and be incredibly impressed, because she had to get through the toughest challenge at Convention of States, and that was being my intern. And yet here she is to tell the tale and continue on. It is just incredible what they are able to do with the young people within this organization. Don't be mad at me, Kristen. I had to say it. And also, I just want to say thank you both for everything that you do, all the hard work that you have poured into the Convention of States movement. And this internship, as you mentioned, it goes beyond politics. It goes beyond Convention of States. We're really arming our young people with even more knowledge and a better understanding of who they are and what they can do as individuals, as a part of this great republic, and preparing them for their next chapter in life. So I really highly recommend it to anyone out there that may have a young person interested, and you can go to conventionofstates.com/intern. But Kristen, Jackson, thank you both so very much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it, and God bless.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan.
All right. Folks, I know we're running a little long here this evening, so please stick with us. We really appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to the Minuteman Mailbag. And there's something about hearing that music right on the eve of Independence Day. I'm ready to go. Okay, so tonight we've got a couple of questions that came in from our supporters out there in the audience, and they were very similar in nature. So I want to kind of go through both of them here tonight. And the first question we got from Dave Phil, and the question was, what is the action plan to get each remaining state on board? Also, this is viewed by many as a conservative initiative. How can we convince moderates and Democrats to join the COS cause? And then Michael Aucoin, I believe is how you pronounce the last name, and if I got that wrong, my apologies, Michael. He said, this COS endeavor has been active for a number of years, and the time is running short. How can the process be moved toward convening a convention sooner rather than later? Both really great questions, and they kind of talk about the exact same thing. How can we get to the convention? How do we ultimately accomplish our goals? And let's face it, it's not easy, right? We've been at this now nearly 11 years. We have 19 states that have passed the COS resolution, and I can assure you that all of us within Convention of States want to see this moving further and moving as quickly as possible. Now, how to answer the question, we have an answer to generally almost any question at Convention of States, and the thing that we have is the answer to any question, the answer to any issue is more grassroots. Bottom line, we have to build the grassroots army in order to be successful, because we cannot have a movement without the people, right? Now, this may not be the sexiest answer or the easiest answer, but it truly is the most important one. We have to be able to go out there, reach, teach, and activate the people out within our country, get them to understand the Constitution in general, but in particular, Article 5 and what their role is within our system of government and how we can call this convention. And you heard from Dr. Franklin earlier this evening, this is something that they intended. It was a legitimate convention that took place in 1787, and the expectation was that we, the people, would be the guardians of what they had provided to us, and we would pass it on to posterity. And in order for us to do that, we have to be engaged. We have to understand what's going on. We have to be talking with legislators, visiting the Capitol, and getting them to pass our resolution. So as Producer G put up there, please go to conventionofstates.com/act and sign up to become a volunteer. That is one of the most important things you can do. And the more we have a grassroots army and a groundswell from the people, the faster we will be able to convince legislators to pass this resolution and get it through. Now, I want to also talk about Democrats and independents, because Dave was asking, that this is a conservative initiative. How can we convince them to join the cause? Well, we have a graphic, and I believe Producer G will put it up on the screen. Take a look at some of the polling that we have done, okay? When we talk to them about Convention of States, you can see that regardless of political affiliation, people are in favor of an Article 5 convention. 81% of Republicans, 50% of Democrats, 63% of independents. It just by far shows you that it doesn't matter what the political affiliation is. People want to have a convention for these specific purposes. And you also heard earlier that we did some polling in Ohio, and 76% of registered voters there want to see our resolution passed. Why? Why is this? Why do we feel that? Why is it that no matter what, when it comes to most political issues, there's a major divide, but yet this one, everyone comes together? And the reason for that is because the fundamental question of who decides. Do we want people in Washington, D.C. and unelected bureaucrats that we talked about earlier making the decisions on the most important things, or do we want them made closer to home? And the answer is resounding that people want the decisions made closer to home amongst we the people. You and I should be the ones that are contacting our state legislators and making the important things. And yeah, we have a situation right now where we have states that are very different, right? Their makeup is very different. People that live in California, very different than perhaps the people in Florida and their value system and what they want to see accomplished. Same with New Jersey and Texas. There's a lot of differences already within the states, and yet what should be is that the state legislature should be making the decisions on the most important things, and we want to make sure that the federal government is out of the way and not influencing the states one way or another. Allow them to make the decisions, allow the people within those states to make the decisions, and then if they're not happy about it, they can always make a move to another state. So it's really important. Now, admittedly, you saw all that information. We have it available, conventionofstates.com/polling. We need to do better with our language in general when it comes to messaging, particularly as it relates to Democrats and independents. Look, I used to live in New Jersey, so I am sensitive to this issue in particular because I understand that the language that is used in a Florida or in a Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi may resonate with that population, and it may not resonate with the people of New Jersey or New York, or perhaps only a small portion of the people that live in those states. We do need to do a better job of making sure that we are reaching everyone, that we're not trying to exclude anyone. And I can assure you that is something that Convention of States takes very seriously, and we want to make sure that we're doing that and working with our teams at an individual level to make sure that we're getting things done. Now, part of that question was action plans. They're state specific, right? So we don't necessarily go in there and dictate to the states what they should be doing. It is something that the grassroots come to us. We are not a top-down organization. We are bottom-up. the grassroots are the ones that run this thing and will ultimately see us to victory, because this is all about the people engaging and taking action. So if you are interested and you want to know exactly how you can make a difference within your state, go on and connect with your state leadership team, sign up to become a volunteer, contact someone through our website. And yes, as we mentioned earlier, past states need you too. So even if you live in a state that's already passed our resolution, don't dismiss that. Still sign up, get involved. We have to protect the ground that we have gained, because our opposition is out there and doing everything they can to stymie us and to take away what we have already managed to successfully gain. And we need you. So please, no matter what state you're in, consider becoming a volunteer. And folks, the bottom line, I want to take a line from State Director of Florida, Dina Butts, who I have the pleasure of working with. She said, this is not a sprint. It's not a marathon. This is a way of life, right? What we're talking about is restoring our country to a culture of self-governance, reclaiming liberty. And that's not something that's to be taken lightly or something that can happen quickly. The faster we can go is dependent upon the people that are willing to get engaged, the people that are willing to take the time to make the phone calls, to show up at the Capitol, to hold meetings, to engage with legislators, to engage with their fellow citizens and educate them on this issue. We need to change the way we think as a nation and get people reactivated within our culture, or we will not be successful. And so that is why we are trying to do something where we are changing the way people perceive their role within our country. And it's not going to be an overnight thing, but we will get there surely much faster if you get involved and you step up and join the Grassroots Army. So thank you so much to Dave and Michael for writing in those great questions. They're important questions, and they don't have easy answers, but they're very, very important that we have those discussions. So thank you so much for writing in. And folks, if you want to write in and have an opportunity to have your question answered on this program, please go to conventionofstates.com/mailbag and submit a question. All right, let's move on to COS Voices. All right, so as I've mentioned before, one of the top questions that we get at Convention of States is, how can I effectively communicate the COS message quickly? Thankfully, we've got amazing activists that have done this, and they've already put together recordings of exactly how to communicate this message succinctly. And tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from Emily Hamilton of California.
Would you rather have bureaucrats in D.C. making decisions for your life, or would you rather have those decisions made closer to home? Can you imagine Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell voting for term limits? Or Congress reining in spending and balancing the budget? These are necessary, common-sense changes most Americans agree with. The problem, though, is that the federal government will never limit its power on its own. That is why the Constitution includes provisions for the states to pass amendments outside of Congress to rein in Congress. It takes 34 states to call a convention and 38 to ratify amendments proposed by the states. The process is intentionally difficult to ensure any amendments have widespread support. By focusing on structural changes most people believe in, we can bring the power back to the states and to the people.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emily. Really appreciate that. And it amazes me how our grassroots are able to take such a complicated issue and boil it down to such a succinct answer and get it across and resonate with people. So thank you so much, Emily, for doing that. And I love to hear from our Grassroots Army. Folks, we are at the conclusion of our episode. I want to thank you again for joining us. And just a reminder that all COS at Home shows are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Our next show will be on Wednesday, August 7th at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And our guest will be Professor Randy Barnett from Georgetown University, a strong supporter of Convention of States and Article 5. And I'm really looking forward to sitting down and talking with him. I mentioned before, how can we raise the intelligence? Well, we're going to have a professor on to talk with us. So it'd be great to talk with Professor Barnett. So I hope you'll join us for that conversation. But now, as I said, we are at the conclusion of our episode, and I want to thank you so very much for for taking the time to be with us. I know we've gone a little long. I want to thank Dr. Ben Franklin for sitting down and joining us and really inspiring us with an incredible message. Thank you to Kristen and to Jackson as well, coming on and talking about the Emerging Leaders Program. And thank you, of course, to the legendary Producer G for all of the hard work that he does behind the scenes. And yes, thank you, Producer G, for throwing that on the screen. If you want to follow Ben Franklin more, please go to www.benfranklin.live to follow more information about Ben Franklin. He's been out and about and has a lot of incredible things coming up, so you want to follow him. But of course, the greatest thanks, as always, ladies and gentlemen, goes to you for all of your support of Article 5 and the Convention of States movement. It's important that we remember, despite everything that's going on, and I know that I didn't do it justice in trying to quickly talk about it with Dr. Franklin, all of the issues our country faces, our culture is deteriorating. Despite all of that, we live in the greatest country that man has ever known. And the solution to that problem looks right directly back at me. And as I look out at you and I, we the people, we're the solution. We have the ability to solve any problem that comes our way. And so thank you so much for everything that you do. And to close out our program tonight, I just want to read the final paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. So if you'll bear with me, and I will say that we, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Independence Day. Happy birthday, America. God bless all of you, and may God always bless the United States of America. Have a good night, and thank you for watching.